In this presentation, we will introduce CREST, which is a redesign of the REST system that allows it to be compacted. We have named our system CREST, which stands for Compact Retrieval-Based Speculative Decoding. Our system improves upon REST, or Retrieval-Based Speculative Decoding, which is a drafting technique that leverages a data store to replace the small language model that is required in speculative decoding. We have identified two key issues within REST, the first being n-gram redundancy and its associated storage overhead, and the second being the overall drafting time complexity. Our proposed system solves these problems by intelligently selecting n-grams to include in the data store, which effectively optimizes storage usage, and we present the various experiments we conducted to determine the best strategy to use when constructing the optimized data store. An overview of our key contributions are that we redesigned the structure of the REST data store by decoupling n-grams from each other. We developed a compaction technique that cuts down on the size of the data store and also outperforms REST in terms of draft token acceptance length. We were able to accelerate the overall drafting time complexity of REST from log n time to constant time. We made 2 pull requests to the original REST repository, fixing 2 bugs that we uncovered during our experimentation, and we were able to achieve a draft token acceptance length of 2.4 tokens, which outperforms REST's peak draft token acceptance rate by 16.8% without requiring any additional training or serving overhead.
Now, before we move on to introducing our system, we will first introduce some related works. To start with, we would like to briefly introduce what speculative decoding is. Speculative decoding is a method to speed up the inferencing process when using large language models. Instead of generating a single next token sequentially, like in the classic autoregressive decoding method, speculative decoding generates multiple tokens at each step, which are verified in parallel by the target LLM. Any drafted tokens after a token that is rejected by the LLM are discarded. The term speculative decoding itself was introduced in a paper called Exploiting Speculative Execution for Accelerating Sequence-to-Sequence Generation. They used a specialized non-autoregressive transformer as an independent drafter. Other works utilize smaller versions of the large target LLMs as drafting models, enabling speculative decoding without the need for additional fine-tuning. Some approaches choose to utilize the target LLM itself instead of introducing additional drafting models. In a paper called Medusa, they integrate feed-forward neural nets into the transformer decoder, which enables parallel token generation per step. Alternatively, certain methods focus on enhancing parallel decoding performance without altering the model architecture. The paper called PASS introduces learnable tokens, and they fine-tune their new embeddings on a small training dataset to improve parallel decoding efficiency. In this paper, we focused on REST. REST stands for Retrieval-Based Speculative Decoding, and their main idea is to retrieve draft tokens from a pre-built data store. It performs speculative decoding by retrieving context from the data store that match the latest tokens of the current context. Based on their retrieved results, REST utilizes a tree data structure to select draft tokens. A key advantage of REST is that it does not use ML components to draft tokens, which eliminates the need for any form of training. However, a limitation of REST is its memory efficiency due to the large size of its data store. The volume of stored context and their continuation imposes significant memory requirements.
REST's data store simply stores an entire pre-training dataset, which is essentially a big chunk of tokens. They then build another data structure on top of it called a suffix array, shown in blue here. REST stores the pre-training dataset as is, which takes a lot of disk space and is the problem we tried to tackle. When drafting, REST takes what's called the context, which is the latest n tokens that have been generated. In this example, the context is machine learning. With the help of the suffix array, it finds all occurrences of this context in the data store. Then it takes the next m tokens after each of them, which are called continuations. Now we have a list of continuations. We take these independent continuations and merge them into a token tree, which is then passed to the LLM for verification. Now, a problem with REST is that it stores an entire pre-training dataset, which can get quite large. Ideally, there'd be some way to compact the data store so that you retain most of the information but with much less disk space. One idea you might have is to remove the duplicate n-grams or the uncommon n-grams. However, if you tried to remove specific tokens from the data store like this, you run into a fundamental problem with REST. Here, we see an example data store that contains, here's a bunch of tokens in a row. Assume that our contexts are 2 grams and our continuations are 3 grams. With these sizes, the data store has 5 different context continuation pairs that you can match on. However, if you remove even a single token, you're left with only one context continuation pair that you can match on. If you think about it, each token in REST simultaneously serves as part of multiple different contexts and multiple different continuations. While this is a very efficient way to store things, it makes it difficult to modify the data store in a targeted manner. Our solution at a high level is about decoupling these contexts and continuations from each other so that the data store may be compacted. Specifically, we store a map from n-grams to token trees, where the token trees are built by querying the REST data store. Of course, this initially increases the size of the data store. However, it gets rid of duplicates upfront and allows us to remove uncommon n-grams without affecting the other n-grams. Here's an overview of our system. I'll first focus on the parts in black, which are the parts we didn't build. The data set is a collection of thousands of conversations. The REST data store stores these raw conversations as is and also builds a suffix array over them. REST is used to draft token trees, which are then passed to the LLM for verification. The system's whole drafting accuracy is then evaluated on a collection of a few dozen prompts called a benchmark. The main component we built was the CREST data store, which is simply a Postgres database that stores n-grams and token trees. To build the CREST data store, we first analyze the dataset and find the most common n-grams. Then we use the most common n-grams to query an already built REST data store to get the token trees. Finally, the CREST data store is used to draft token trees and is evaluated with the same benchmarks.
In our evaluation, we ran all of our experiments using one NVIDIA L4 Ensure Core GPU and 8 vCPUs. We used the training datasets from ShareGPT and the stack to construct the data store, and we experimented with data store sizes ranging over 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and 100% of the training samples. We evaluated the performance of our data store in two different settings, the first being with the 7B version of the Kuna on the empty bench dataset, and the second being the 7B version of Code Llama on the human eval dataset. For our baseline against the original REST, we constructed REST data stores using a random sample of 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and 100% of the training samples for each of the two datasets. We constructed the CREST data stores using our best performing combined top T strategy, which is discussed in more detail in the following slide. From our baseline test results, CREST outperforms REST at every data store size on both the human eval and empty bench evaluation datasets. The first plot demonstrates how REST achieves a high of 1.77 draft token acceptance length at the 100% data store size, while CREST surpasses this metric and reaches a 1.9 draft token acceptance length. The second plot illustrates how REST attains a maximum accepted token length of 2.17 for human eval at the 100% data store size, while CREST again exceeds this with an accepted token length of 2.37.
We also conducted an experiment to analyze how the accepted lengths vary across various data store sizes and n-gram configurations. We used 20 samples from each of the empty bench and human eval benchmark. We chose an equal number of the T most frequent n-grams for each group, so that they add up to the specified number of n-grams on the x-axis. For both plots, as the number of n-grams increases, we observe a general trend of increasing accepted length. One notable observation is that for empty bench, with a constant small data store size with about 32,000 n-grams, the accepted length tends to be longer when utilizing only up to 2 n-grams compared to using up to 3 or 4 n-grams. We think that this could be due to larger n-grams not having complete trees containing all 64 tokens. For human eval, it can be seen that for a given number of n-grams, including larger n-grams almost always tends to yield longer accepted lengths compared to using more smaller n-grams. We believe this is due to continuations in code sequences being more dependent on patterns of previous n-grams compared to general conversations.
In conclusion, CREST is a system that uncouples n-grams and continuations into dictionary structure for efficiently scaling down the data store in retrieval-based speculative decoding. It outperforms REST for all data store sizes, and we believe it is a robust and scalable solution for speculative decoding that can scale to very large pre-training datasets. Thank you for listening.